Michael, thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here with you again.
So you've just written a report, Power to Change.
Yes, that's correct, in support of the Clean Energy Ministerial and the work we're doing with the G20 group of countries.
So what's the executive summary of this report?
Well, the high-level message is very positive. The cost reductions for solar and wind technologies, so we're talking about onshore, offshore, solar PV and concentrating power, are going to continue into the future. There's some interesting developments in terms of the drivers of those cost reductions are starting to change. And there's also needs to be a change in the policy emphasis as a result to ensure that we start unlocking some of these cost reductions. It's not going to be the same process in the past that we've seen.
How are these cost reductions coming about?
There are a number of drivers that are a continuation of existing trends. So we have the technology improvements that are ongoing. In the case of solar PV, as we increase the efficiency, of course, the unit cost comes down because we're reducing the area required. Onshore wind turbines, we're getting higher hub heights, larger swept areas, but in addition to the technology improvements, we're seeing the growth in the scale of the markets. So we're getting economies of scale in manufacturing, we're getting increased competition in the supply chain. All of these help to drive down costs. And then of course there's your manufacturing side of things where the efficiencies are always unlocked as people compete to win their next contract.
And is this globally, or are these within specific regions?
Renewables is interesting as a relatively few number of large manufacturers in some cases, but they have relatively small market share. So this is very much a global discussion now in terms of the manufacturing, despite the fact that solar PV manufacturing is obviously concentrated in China at the moment. But there are local content requirements that are driven by the economics. So you don't want to be shipping a lot of these large items, for instance, around the world. So there's, for instance, for blade manufacturing, it made sense if there's a sufficient market scale to develop regional manufacturing centres. So it's a global plus a local business. It's a good blend of global economic opportunities and local employment.
Do you think this trend will continue, or will it eventually plateau?
The cost reduction trend is going to continue. Again, it's more of an extension of what's already been happening. I think the interesting thing, particularly for solar PV and also for wind, is that the cost reduction drivers are changing. So previously, the rapid reduction in module prices, around 80% since 2009, drove most of the cost reduction at a global kind of weighted average level. Obviously, it differs a little bit by market. Some markets are more efficient than others, as I'm sure your listeners know all too well. But in the future, most of that cost reduction opportunity now with these very low module prices is going to come from a balance of system costs. So that's more challenging for policymakers. You've got a large number of small components that contribute to make up the balance of system costs, from racking and mounting, cabling, permitting costs. So policymakers need to address that, and there are a large number of stakeholders and also regulatory overlays. So addressing that is going to become more homework for them and perhaps more challenging. For wind, the big change really is that we're likely to see, with the trend to higher hub heights and larger turbines, it's going to be increasingly difficult to drive down unit costs per kilowatt. So those cost reductions are going to slow, so we're going to see a higher share of the cost reduction opportunity actually coming from those benefits of those technology developments. So the higher capacity factor at an existing site, given the larger swept area, higher hub heights. So whereas in the past around 2/3 of the cost reductions from onshore wind came from the reduction in installed costs, that will reverse and it'll be 2/3 in the future coming from the technology improvements.
It's interesting that you haven't encapsulated energy storage in this report at all. Why is that?
First of all, we tend to do work that covers a specific technology area or component. Once we've done that, we then have the opportunity, with the knowledge that we've gained from that process, to integrate it in our work on energy modelling or system analysis. So actually it's next on the list of things to do, because energy storage and electricity storage in particular is very important to the energy transition. It's important today, for instance, in solar home systems, rely on batteries. Likewise, on islands, we can go very rapidly now with the low cost of solar PV, very high shares of variable renewables. But there's no geographic distribution. If there's a cloud comes over your 8 megawatt single power plant, the power goes off. So economic already for them to integrate 10 minutes of storage to mean that their system can stay stable, that has times for their diesel gensets to spool up in this seamless electricity supply. At the same time, they've reduced their diesel imports. Longer term, of course, when we get to very high shares of variable renewables, and unfortunately, of course, we're not at that point. California and probably Germany are pushing the envelope in that respect. We're going to need more flexibility. And so storage, if the price is right, is going to be part of that. And what we want to do is understand where those kind of trade-offs are, how much demand-side flexibility is going to come through. Do we use thermal energy storage on the demand side because it's cheap? You know, water, space storage, water heaters, very cheap, bit bulky. Can we integrate that in the smart grid to provide the equivalent flexibility? Obviously, areas where we desperately need as well lower cost batteries is in transportation. So Tesla leads the way in many respects. There's a lot of other manufacturers in China, for instance, who have big plans, but they're reducing costs, improving performance so that we get greater range, greater lifetime, more cycles out of them, is particularly important longer term. And of course then at that point we can integrate them into the smart grid and they can provide some flexibility as well. So longer term we're very interested in batteries.
We'll look forward to reading that report when it comes out.
Indeed.
Michael, pleasure as always. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.